let's go ahead and get started. And then if we have some late joiners, they'll miss out on just the introduction. So I'm Hannah Birdsong. I'm the program manager for the Small Business Development Center here in Southwest Colorado. So a little bit about the SBDC. There's 15 centers in Colorado, and we support small businesses with free confidential consulting, low-cost trainings, and business courses, like this one today. So Jennifer, will you switch to the next slide? So if you would like to tap into any of our free consulting or low-cost workshops, you can contact any of us below. Mary Shepard is the director of the program. Again, I'm the program manager, and then Kiki is the disaster recovery coordinator. So there's 3 of us. So if you need any assistance, any small business support right now, you can reach out to any of those contacts below. So today, we're excited to have Jennifer Bassignani. She is our HR consultant on our SBDC team. So we have been working with her to create this webinar, How to Manage Your Remote Workers Equitably. So we thought this would be a great time to host this webinar when back to school activities and work and somewhat normal life is approaching again. So we wanted to provide this so Jennifer can show some guidance and give some solutions of how to create a flexible work environment for your employees as they're navigating these new and tricky times. So today we're going to cover,
Sorry.
No worries. Today we're going to cover how to decide which employees should and could be working from home, how to create those policies around that, how to keep those remote workers engaged, coming up with new work schedules, and then also how to prepare for the unknown. So a little bit about Jennifer. She has been working in over 15 years in HR consulting. She started her own company this year called Essential Operations. And she specializes in small to mid-sized businesses and supporting HR practices in Southwest Colorado. She is a certified senior professional in HR. She sits on the board of the Durango Area of Human Resource Management and is also on the board chair of the Women's Resource Center. She joined our SBDC team this year, I think back in January, maybe. So. Who knows where the time has gone. But we have been so happy with her on our team. She has come up with awesome solutions and really problem solving with local businesses to improve their employee relations. And we have just really loved having her. So I'm going to pass it off to Jennifer and let her introduce herself a little bit more. But first, I guess one thing, we are recording this webinar. If you do have any questions, there is the Q&A feature or the chat feature. So we will be monitoring those, and I'll come back in at the end of the webinar and I will help Jennifer answer those questions.
Thank you, Hannah. I appreciate the introduction. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking time out of your day to join me. As Hannah mentioned, today we're going to talk about how to manage remote workers. We have seen people starting to come back to work over the last couple of months, and now we're looking at the possibility of school being back in session. Who knows how long that will be. So I'm going to kind of help give some suggestions and recommendations about how to handle remote work requests, how to do that equitably so that everybody feels as if they're being taken care of and their voice is heard, and then maybe some policies to consider putting in place as well to kind of manage everything, make sure there's clear expectations and guidance around letting people work from home or managing a flexible schedule. And as Hannah said, if you have questions along the way, please feel free to ask, or we'll allow plenty of time at the end of the presentation. As Hannah said, I've been doing human resources for over 15 years. I decided to start my own practice late in 2019 and then took the leap in April of this year, which was an odd time to do that. But so far I've had success and I've enjoyed the smaller businesses I've worked with. I try to focus on small to mid-sized businesses because I understand that you don't always need a full-time HR person, or you don't have the resources for an HR person. However, if you have employees, you likely need some HR support whether it's making sure your personnel files are in compliance, or you need some help strategizing about how to best hire and write job descriptions, to employment planning. Are you planning on growing in the next 6 months, year, 2 years, and how can we project what your hiring should look like? So with that, we'll go ahead and get started about managing your remote workers equitably. We'll start out with just a couple of statistics. In June of 2020, PricewaterhouseCoopers did a poll and found that 72% of employees wanted to work from home at least 2 days a week. And in May of 2020, Gallup conducted a poll and found that approximately 50% of their remote workers wanted to continue to work from home after the restrictions have been lifted. So I think the theme here will be that even prior to COVID, employees have been looking for ways to have more flexibility and more work-life balance. And then COVID came along, and many businesses learned and employees learned that people can work remotely and they can do it effectively and efficiently. And it's a really nice thing to have as a benefit for employees. It helps employees manage their lives a little bit better. And so we'll dive into that a little bit more. We'll start out with kind of the staying in compliance, what we need to keep in mind as we have remote workers. I will say that some of this information changes, so I will stress that going to the Department of Labor website is your best resource to see if anything has changed, and how things kind of work between the Family First Coronavirus Response Act and the Family Medical Leave Act. So we'll start with the SPHR Act. That applies to basically all employers that have 500 or fewer employees, no matter how small the business. This focuses on ensuring that workers are not forced to choose between their paychecks and public health measures needed to combat the COVID virus. It provides up to 2 weeks or 80 hours of paid sick leave at 2/3 the employer's regular rate of pay if you have an employee that can't come to work because they're a caregiver, or they have a child under the age of 18 and schools close, and or their child care provider is unable to work or provide child care. Also provides 2 weeks or up to 80 hours of paid sick leave at the employer's regular rate of pay if the employee needs to be quarantined or is experiencing COVID symptoms. Some small businesses with fewer than 50 employees may qualify for an exemption from this requirement. Again, you would want to check in with the Department of Labor website so that you would understand what those exemptions may be for your business if you would qualify. The other act to think about when allowing employees to take time off to care for family members or themselves is Family Medical Leave Act. That affects employers with more than 50 employees, and employers are obligated to provide up to 12 months of unpaid leave, or 12 weeks of unpaid leave. Again, something you want to look at the Department of Labor website about how does that overlap with SPHR, and I've done some research and there's a couple outstanding questions there that are still under review. So I think that their website is probably your best resource if you have questions. Another kind of interesting statistic is that 68% of organizations report that they probably or definitely will adopt a broader or more flexible work from home policies for all workers. And that's as we're still living and working within COVID, and when we look forward to the day when it's not quite so critical. And equitable, this isn't a word that maybe everybody is familiar with what the meaning is, and so I'll just kind of highlight what that means. When you're being equitable, you're being fair or impartial, and you are looking at everybody that's involved in the decision and how are you making choices that impact everybody on a level playing field. You're not considering some things more than others. You want everyone to feel as if their voices are heard and they have the same chance. So dealing fairly and equally with all concerned. So how do you decide who returns to work and who gets to continue to work from home? Eventually, the social distancing orders will be lifted and businesses will reopen, as we've seen, as we're experiencing right now. However, employees will probably continue to request to work from home or to have flexible work hours. And so how do we do that in a way that is equitable, that makes sure that your business is still running successfully and you're meeting your bottom line? I think first and foremost is obviously the health and safety of our employees. Monitor federal and regional health guidelines. Using an employee survey to get some insight on the life of your employees. Are they a caregiver? Do they possibly have personal health factors? Are they a parent that is juggling with childcare and or in the next couple of weeks becoming teachers at home again? And what does that look like for them? Everybody is impacted by this virus differently. It's not always having a personal health factor that may prohibit them from coming to work, but it could be mental. It could be the anxiety of being back out in public and what that means. So that's another consideration. And then obviously what jobs necessitate the employee to be on site. You can't serve burgers from home. I realize you can't sell shoes from home. So there are some jobs in which you obviously need to have your employees physically on site so that your business is running effectively and keeping the doors open. And then a couple things to think about as you're accommodating these requests. I think as we've seen, lots of businesses have been successful having employees work from home. And I think one of the bigger struggles is how do we know that your employees are doing the job they're supposed to be doing, that their productivity is high? And that is a challenge with employees that work from home, but I think there's ways around that, and we'll talk about that in a few slides. But some things to consider is the request due to an issue related with the American with Disabilities Act. That has to be something considered, and what sort of reasonable accommodations can the employer make for their employee. If the employee has been working from home for the past 4 or 5 months, however long it's been, have they been meeting expectations while telecommuting? Has their performance been good or above average? If so, let's continue to accommodate that request if possible. If their performance issues if you're seeing performance issues, can they still work from home? And once we can lift our gaze, kind of tune into what those are and how do we elevate the employee again, get them back to a place where their productivity is high. Some businesses have had to pivot, and making that pivot is the physical presence of your workers necessary to keep your doors open. And again, going back to productivity, if employees are working from home and productivity has increased, let's encourage them to continue to work from home if that's working for everybody. 80% of employees said they would be more loyal to their employers if they have flexible work options, according to a 2019 survey by Flex Jobs. What I've seen prior to COVID is employees looking for that benefit of having a flexible work schedule, of being able to work from home, work from a coffee shop when and if that's available. But it really is a sought after benefit. It helps with work-life balance. And as you can see, 80% of employees, this is something that they continue to look for. And it helps build morale, boost morale, build trust amongst employees. So just another statistic about how important new employees are looking at the flexibility of being able to work from home. So weighing some of the opportunities and challenges of allowing employees to work from home, enhancing their morale, managing attendance and reducing absenteeism, Good retention of good workers, boosting productivity if it's set up correctly, the work-life balance that we've talked about a couple times, and allowing for businesses to continue during an emergency circumstances, such as what we're in right now. If we start to put policies and procedures in place about how we allow employees to continue to work at home, in the event that we have another spike in COVID, that we may have to shutter businesses again, limit the number of people in spaces. This is good business practice to figure out how we can make this work for the benefit of everybody and to keep businesses open and meeting their bottom line. I think some of the challenges, and some of us, I think, maybe are experiencing this now, of allowing employees to work from home, communicating broadly to achieve the benefits of why do we allow some employees to work from home? Why do we continue to do this? Upper management's resistance to change. It can be difficult to go from checking in on your employees physically on a regular basis to having to take a step back and trust. And that can be a big change for supervisors and management. The control issue of not being able to see your employees and what they're doing at all times. How do we mitigate that? How do we build trust and help employers, supervisors trust that their employees are getting their work done at home and in a timely manner? And we can talk a little bit about that in a couple of slides. Working in team collaboration. I've worked in an environment where I had coworkers that didn't work in the office and would hear often that they've missed out on big conversations, that a project has taken a turn that they weren't aware of. And that is tough if we're not all sitting in the same office and you can't walk down the hallway and knock on the door. I think there's some ways, and we'll talk about this, to kind of mitigate that as well, to make sure that everybody feels as if they are part of their team, even if they're not in the personal workspace with some of their coworkers. And maintaining safety and security of some sensitive company information. And we can talk about policies that we can put in place to make sure that the computers that are being used are company owned, that there's firewalls set up, and some other things that we can do to make sure that information is staying private and secure. Another consideration for employers, as opposed to just the working from home full-time, is a flexible working schedule. So maybe somebody isn't working from home 5 days a week. Maybe they're coming in the office 2 days a week and working from home 3 days a week, or however that looks. But it allows employees to still have some time to provide childcare, the remote learning, meet personal needs, alleviate some anxiety of coming into the office. You can kind of stagger shifts so that you only have, if you have a team of 10, maybe there's only 5 people in the office at a time. You can set up some core work hours where you know that everybody will be tuned in, whether they're in the office or working from home, from the hours of 10 to 2, so that everybody knows that people are available during that time, that meetings can happen, that if you instant message somebody, that they'll be available for you. And I'll just take a pause. I kind of went through that a little bit quickly, but if there's any questions that have popped up, Hannah. Okay. So we'll move into some policies to consider, or that I would recommend to have in place if you are considering remote workers. I think the number one policy, if you have people working from home now and you do not have a telecommuting policy, I think we should work on that immediately. This can be temporary or long-term, and you want to define clear expectations of the employee's working hours. For those employees that are hourly, we want to make sure that you're tracking time worked. Outline clear expectations of performance, what that looks like. Communication, what platforms will be used for communication as an employee is telecommuting. Reimbursement for business expenses. as your employees have shifted from being in the office to home, what sort of expenses will you cover? Do they need a new, faster modem, something that's more secure? What supplies do they need to have at home so that their workspace is functionable? Phone, internet, and these are all things that you can discuss and kind of negotiate with your employees. You're certainly not going to, likely are not going to pay for a remodel so that they have their own office space or buy office furniture. However, that's something to consider if they need to have a working space and need some help putting that together with a desk and chair. You may be able to help them out on some level. Another policy to consider is an acceptable use policy, and this has to do kind of with cybersecurity. How are your employees going to access sensitive company information? You set up a VPN so that they have to go through some secure channels to access things such as QuickBooks or employee files or any sensitive company information that employees may need to access while they're at home. Are you providing your employees with a company-owned computer, or are they using their own device? I strongly recommend that you try to supply a company-owned device. I think about employees that start out using their own computer, and then it stops working, and then it's on the employer to buy a new computer so they can continue working, and the employee is now left without a computer. And how do you balance that? So I do recommend trying to, when possible, providing your own equipment to your employees. Plus you have some control about what sort of information can be downloaded. And just, again, it's best practices for your business. The flexible schedule policy that we talked about a couple of slides ago, again, setting the core hours. Everybody will be available and working during this time, so we know the best times to collaborate, when possible to set meetings during those times, and that those people will be available to contact when and if needed. And you also want to be mindful of setting restrictions on what hours employees cannot work. I think what I've heard and seen, we're working from home, so it's easy to wake up in the morning and open your computer and start working away and not really take breaks, and or continue to work late in the night. And some of that has to do with the convenience of working at home, and we don't have a whole lot else to do. I think in Durango, we're lucky. We have the ability to get outside and still go for walks and hikes and enjoy a lot of things that Durango has to offer. But at the same time, we have those employees that are in it, and this keeps them occupied and gives them something to do, but we don't want them to get burnt out. So saying that, you know, these are your work hours from 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. We don't want you working outside of those hours. And being mindful of, again, those employees that are hourly, that they're tracking those hours worked. And we'll talk a little bit more about that coming up, but that's something to be aware of as well. A couple other policies to consider: a notice of workplace exposure to a communicable disease. This policy basically goes out and lets your employees know, we do have an employee that has been affected by COVID. This person interacted with this group of employees during this time, and these are the steps that we're taking to make sure that our employees are safe, and maybe allowing employees that were exposed to this employee, maybe they get to go home and self-quarantine as well, just to kind of help mitigate the spread and transmission. But it's a good policy to have on hand in the event that there is exposure in your workplace. Probably a good time to look at your vacation and travel policy. I think it's important that we're encouraging employees to take vacations. We all need a break. We're all stressed, we have anxiety, maybe a little stir crazy. So encourage your employees to take some time off and think about, do they need to come back and self-quarantine after they have traveled? And what does that look like? Do they quarantine for 10 to 14 days after? If they've been on a flight, where are they traveling to? And make sure that this is across the board. I have heard of some instances where kind of the higher ups don't hold themselves accountable for this, but they're asking their employees to do that. So something to consider for the safety of your employees in our community. And then lastly, time to maybe review your PTO and sick leave policy. Is it in line with the FFCR Act? And make sure that you're accommodating your employees. Can you expand sick leave right now? Do you want to consider unlimited PTO right now? Just kind of checking in to see what you have and what updates you need to make. And I will say around all of these policies, any changes that you make, anything new that you make or decide to implement in your organization, take time to explain it to your employees, take time so that they understand why it's being implemented, make sure that they read through it, you answer questions, and that they sign it so that if you go back and somebody is telecommuting and they perhaps are not living up to the productivity, the performance that you had outlined for them, you can kind of go back and say, okay, this is what we've discussed. This is what I need to see from you to continue working from home, to telecommute. It's not happening. What do we need to do? But anytime that you're making changes like this within your workforce, it's good to make sure that you're intentional about it and answering any questions and spending time to make sure that your employees understand why those changes are taking place. I touched on this a little bit, but be aware of wage and hour laws. Require that your non-exempt employees, your hourly employees, are accurately documenting all time worked. So if you use one of our local payroll processing companies, they have clock in, clock out abilities for your employees. Make sure that they're using those. The same policies that apply to employees that are working on site should apply to employees that are able to work remotely. And again, create a set work schedule to help with accounting for hours. And that is something you would define in your telecommuting or your work from home policy. You know, I think we've all seen the employees that we consider our star employees, and they would never consider working overtime or clocking overtime. They just want to get the job done. They want to make sure that their employer is happy. However, that's illegal. So you want to make sure that you explain to your hourly non-exempt employees that they really do need to be honest and accurate with all hours worked. You can define in the telecommuting work from home policy that overtime is not allowed without it being first approved by the supervisor, and just kind of keep track of that. If they continue to work overtime and it's not approved by the supervisor, disciplinary actions can be taken. But just try to explain to them it's for them. We want to make sure that they're taking breaks, that they aren't overworking, that they're not getting burnt out. And we want them to continue to be the great employees that they are. So how are we going to keep everyone connected? If you have a hybrid working environment, you have some people in the office, some people working remotely, how do you keep that sense of team, of collaboration? And it's not easy. It definitely takes some intention. It takes some time and thought. And so here's some ideas about kind of how to do this. And it's an ongoing project. It's not something that you just lay some things out and it happens. You really do have to be mindful kind of all the time about your employees that are not in your face, that you see sitting at their desks. So I recommend Zoom meetings. I think hopefully at this point we've all had at least one. I like to schedule a weekly all-team meeting and have a set schedule that it's going to, start at 9 o'clock and it will end at 9:45. However, we'll open the Zoom meeting up 15 minutes early and we'll let it run for an additional 15 or 20 minutes. And encourage employees to log on early and to stay late so they have an opportunity to communicate with their employees that or their staff, coworkers that are not sitting with them any longer, that they don't see on a daily basis or even a weekly basis. It's not mandatory, it's optional, and it can be a really nice way for people to catch up. And then even from there, maybe they end up breaking out into their own, little meeting after that to catch up on things, or just to talk about projects that they're working on or that they've heard about. The other is maybe some intentional icebreakers at the beginning of meetings. I think we get used to saying, "How are you doing today?" And our response is fine. But maybe something that's more intentional, that kind of gets employees to open up so that we're learning about their life outside of the office, and keeping us connected. But something along, what is the best thing that happened to you last week? If you heard that somebody's dog was having puppies, let's ask about the puppies, and kind of bring those personal conversations into our Zoom meetings. And I think we're doing well with that, but the intention behind it, and not rely on "How are you?" "I'm fine." And I will stress that keeping your meetings, especially with Zoom meetings, because we tend to have so many of them, really keeping your agendas on time and having an agenda so that we're best use of people's times. I think that that's important. Slack, I don't know how many of you are familiar with that, but that's a communication platform that's kind of like instant messaging. You can set up different channels within Slack. I've used it for different projects that I've been working on with different groups of people, and we can communicate within those channels kind of privately. But I've also used it as more of a sharing platform, again, to engage all of the staff. So you can set up a Slack channel for pictures or for fun and joy, a book club, recipes, anything that, again, kind of keeps us connected, and sharing things and kind of laughing and sharing life experiences, since we don't see each other every day. Another thought would be to team up remote workers with in-office workers, if you have that hybrid setup, and ask them to facilitate a meeting or ask them to facilitate a training. And I would try to cross teams, so it's not just somebody in your marketing department or your sales department teaming up. Again, you're building new teams working together. They're going to learn from each other and likely hear some other things that are happening within your business that they might not be picking up on in regular meetings. And most importantly, over communication. If you're having what I call a passive or a hallway conversation, and you know that Betsy should be involved, but she's not in the office, she's working remotely, and you can't just walk down the hall and grab her, I would suggest you stop the conversation and get Betsy on the phone, set up the speakerphone so that everybody is involved in those conversations and feeling as if they are part of the team, and their voice and opinions matter and they haven't been forgotten. I think that's the biggest thing with remote workers. If you have a hybrid situation, those people that are in the office every day with the FaceTime, being able to go knock on a door, we start to build a team, we start to build camaraderie, and those employees that are working from home start to feel forgotten and left out. So you do have to be intentional about thinking of those people that need to be included in conversations. As a supervisor, as a manager, as an owner of their business, one-on-one meetings. This is going to kind of be your best tool to understand how your remote workers are doing, not only with their workload and productivity, but how are they doing mentally? How are they handling working at home and kind of self-managing themselves in a lot of ways? Where do they need some support that maybe we haven't been aware of? I would suggest doing these at least twice a month, if not on a weekly basis. It doesn't have to be formal. It can be a 15-minute check-in, just to see how they're doing. Is there anything that's popped up? Has anything popped up on your end that you'd like to inform them about sooner than later so that they're kept in the loop. And really make this a priority, again, so that our remote teams are feeling part of the team, that they don't feel forgotten. And then those incentives for our in-office workers. As I've discussed, some people have anxiety around coming in and being with a group of people, leaving their homes, everything that kind of entails, but they do have to come into the office because maybe their job doesn't allow for remote working. So some things that we could offer as employers, as supervisors, to help them feel appreciated. Order coffee or lunch for your staff on a regular basis. Offer longer lunch hours and encourage your staff to get out of the office. Go walk around the block a couple times. Anything to kind of make sure that they're getting fresh air, that they are stepping away, that they have a mental and physical break from their office or business space. Do you have the opportunity perhaps to offer a condensed work week? Does everybody need to be in the office 5 days a week? Is there a way that you can shorten the work week and offer the same pay? And maybe one of those days is a telework day for everybody, but again, just showing appreciation that your employees are showing up in person on a daily basis. And then the flexibility of office working hours. I've heard of some companies that are going to a 32-hour work week. That works for them. They've made some adjustments maybe in how sick and PTO are accrued. But do you have the ability to be flexible with some working hours so that people can get out and, again, showing appreciation for the hard work that they're doing? And then kind of last, the known unknown is what I call this. We've been in this for 4 or 5 months now. I think we've probably all learned quite a bit about how we work, how we can do it effectively remotely, what isn't working remotely, and some changes we may need to make and some evaluations. But what procedures have you put in place or can you put in place in the event that we're asked to shutter businesses again, and to be able to keep working and to be able to keep servicing your clients and your customers? So take some time to reflect on what's worked, what hasn't. And then maybe consider a business continuity impact analysis to devise a recovery strategy. That's taking some time to really kind of audit everything in your business and what would you need, what's most important to keep your business going in the event of another emergency, another shutdown of your business. And I just pulled up that telecommuting is a strategy that can be used, as we've seen, having staff work from home to keep businesses up and running and doing it well. So that takes me to the end. I'm open for any questions that anybody may have out there. I will say that the policies that I shared with you, I have templates for those. If anybody is interested, I'm happy to share those through Hannah, or the best way to get those out to any of you that may be interested.
Thank you, Jennifer. That was awesome. I don't see any questions yet. Maybe we'll give it a minute or two. Any
Sure.
brave souls? And again, this webinar was recorded, and we would be happy to send this out as well as the presentation. Don't forget that Jennifer is one of our SBDC consultants. So if you are interested in meeting one-on-one with Jennifer for some confidential consulting, please reach out to me and I would be happy to set that up. Or if you have any other suggestions of workshops or trainings that you would be interested in or think that the Durango community needs, please email me. We'd be happy to work on getting something together. Okay, so we have a couple questions. How do we deal with performance issues while employees are working remotely?
That's a great question. I think it depends on what the performance issue is. I think your first step is always communication, and timely communication as soon as you see that performance is not up to par, that you have an immediate conversation with your employee and understand what is prohibiting them from doing their job and doing it well. When we talk about things being equitable, are there things in their home office that maybe they're lacking that they need to do a better job? Do they have a slow modem? Is their computer slow? Something, be curious and do some investigation around that. If it is a continued problem, do you have the ability to have this person come back and be an in-person worker? And if not, then we can look at a performance improvement plan where we outline and define what needs to change for the employee to continue to either work from home or to continue to be employed by your business, and set some defined timelines and goals for that individual. I think it always, for me, comes back to curiosity and communication. When did it drop off? Why did it drop off? What challenges might you be having, the employee might be having, that's causing some of these performance issues?
Thank you. Okay, another question. Any additional strategies to address management that is truly having difficulty to increase communications with remote workers? A sense that you have to be present for them to know they are working and being productive.
So I think if I look at this question, so there's communication issues between management and remote workers, and how are we going to bridge that gap? I think picking up the phone is your best tool. I think we rely on email, we can rely on Slack and other forms of instant messaging too much. I think picking up the phone and having a conversation to understand what those difficulties are with communication, and to let your employees know your availability. I think you say a sense that you have to be present for them to know they are working and productive. So this also comes down to trust. This is a tough one. I think this is maybe one of the harder aspects of having remote workers, is trusting that your employees are doing the work that they need to do, and them trusting that you are there to support them when needed. And it comes down to communication, having regular conversations with them, setting out some goals and guidelines about what good performance and communication means for the two of you, and understanding different communication styles and different work styles, and how do you mesh that so that everybody is productive and happy. It takes some work, and I hope that I answered that question. If I need to expand on that, please let me know. But I always come back to the communication part and making yourself available, and picking up the phone and not relying so much on electronic communication.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's very important with a lot of the communication we've been having with Zoom, and it's just, there's definitely fatigue there. I think that was great. That's all that I have, unless anyone else has a couple questions.
I'd also throw out there, just, and this kind of goes maybe to that question that I was just attempting to answer. If you have the ability to bring your remote staff and your in-person staff together, maybe for an outside lunch, for an hour, maybe once a month, once a week, something like that, that is truly kind of more social than work related. Maybe everybody, brings their own lunch, and you meet out at the park, and you just get to actually have FaceTime with each other. that doesn't involve a screen, that's a nice thing to do. I think we all crave to have some connection with people. And this might be an easy, inexpensive way to do that. I realize that shifts, different industries, different shifts, that doesn't always work. But thinking about ways that you can bring your full staff together in a responsible, safe way might be helpful as well. Just something to consider moving forward.
Mm-hmm. And then if you guys would be interested in having like a roundtable discussion where we just get a bunch of people who are kind of struggling and trying to figure out how to manage this, and have a guided conversation with Jennifer, we'd be happy to set something like that up. Or again, if you would like to keep it confidential, we can do one-on-one consultations. But just know that we are here to support you guys, and if there's anything else that you need, please let us know. Thank you guys for tuning in. I will send this information out to you shortly once I have the video up on YouTube. That's it. Thank you guys for joining. Hope you all have a great day.
Thank you everyone for your time today. I appreciate it. Bye-bye.